During the war, I was in the Seabees, and I was a commissary officer, and my job was to make sure that our battalion of Seabees, and we trained the underwater demolition people, were fed. And so one afternoon I went out to get some sun on the beach, and I fell asleep on the beach, and I missed the evening meal. And I knew they had roast beef that night, and so I went into the blast freezer, which is about a little smaller than this room here, to get some roast beef before they would freeze, and make a sandwich. And the night cook didn't realize I was in the freezer, and I heard him padlock the door from the outside. I snapped the light out. The minute he snapped that light out, I ran for that door because I knew he was going to lock it up. And I hollered for help, and he didn't hear me. And I knew I had 5 hours in there before they'd open it up again. You could talk about being petrified with fear. I knew I had to get out of there. And all I had on was a pair of Bermuda shorts. I had an aluminum dial on my wristwatch, and to this day I don't know why I had a pocket knife, but I had a pocket knife. And the first thing I did is I tried to carve my way out, but the whole thing was lined with steel. I couldn't make a dent. And I found that light that was in there, and I pulled all the light and the wire and everything out. I thought if I could create a short, and that didn't work. I built a little igloo of frozen meat and so, and I crawled in that igloo. And then I couldn't remember from high school or college whether you freeze quicker being surrounded by frozen objects or you can conserve your heat. I thought maybe I'd freeze quicker, so I got out of there. All the time, in Tonga, I was absolutely petrified with fear. And all the time, that blast freezer was blowing more cold air in there because of my body temperature. And I found the grill. There was a grill in there, and I pulled a whole grill out of the wall. It's pitch dark, too. And I thought if I could just get my hand onto that fan, even if I'd lose a hand, if I could just stop that fan from running. And there was too many bends and crooks in the ductwork. I did absolutely everything I could intellectually figure out to get out of there. And I couldn't. I just couldn't get out. I just couldn't think of anything else. And then I remember my dad saying during the night, he said, "My Heavenly Father will give me the answer." And I remember I got down on my hands and knees on an old wooden pellet in the middle of that freezer. And I remember I just said, "Dear God, if there's any reason or purpose for my life, somehow you're going to have to get me out of here." And believe me, when I surrendered, there was a peace that came over. You talk about bliss consciousness. There was a peace that came over me. It's undescribable, actually. And I heard a voice in that freezer. And I often wondered if someone would have been in there with me if they'd have heard the voice. It was audible. And it said, "There's a spiritual reason and purpose for your life. Go to the door and call for help." And I argued with it. I said, the night cook didn't hear me. And anybody in that area after a certain hour at night would be court-martialed. It was out of bounds. And the voice came back, just as audible, and said, "Go to the door. There's a spiritual reason and purpose for your life. Go to the door and call for help." And so I did. And I started calling for help. And it was just a short while, and I heard someone outside the door. They opened the door, and I collapsed. They rushed me to the hospital. And the medical people said it would maybe another 20 minutes for me. But the miraculous part of this, the serviceman that heard me said he was out for a walk that evening, and he said it was as if there was a hand on his shoulder, and it just moved him over in front of that freezer. And he said he knew he shouldn't be there, but he couldn't help it. And this guy worked in the cold storage business before he was in the service and recognized it as someone locked in the freezer. He said it sounded like a cat meowing from 50 feet away. So, I know I have a purpose, and I'm fulfilling my purpose now. But I also know that when I totally surrendered all that intellect, all that ordinary mind thinking, and just asked from that level of surrender, I got a voice that talked to me. I haven't heard it since, but I've talked to other people that do hear voice when they ask. And that's how powerful this thing is. We're getting there to the field of all knowledge. And then circumstance events happen on our behalf that create for us whatever it is we're endeavoring to create.